At our Thanksgiving family dinner, my sister publicly mocked my weight in front of everyone. I tried to laugh it off, but when my daughter said, "Mommy, why are they being mean?" I broke down, and what happened next left everyone speechless. I guess I always knew holidays would be a little tense after the divorce, but I still thought maybe, just maybe, Thanksgiving could be different. I wasn't expecting magic or anything, just peace. A couple of polite conversations, a few laughs, some decent food, and then home early before the argument started. This year, like every year, dinner was at my parents' house in Mount Pleasant, right across the bridge from Charleston. It's a big old place, the kind of house that looks like it should be on a postcard. Wraparound porch, rocking chairs, hydrangeas that bloom so big and heavy they almost drag the stems to the ground. I grew up in that house, and in a lot of ways, part of me still feels like the 14-year-old version of myself every time I walk through that door. I pulled into the driveway with Lily in the back seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Binks, the same way I used to clutch my Walkman on long car rides when I was her age. I could already see everyone's cars lined up: Brielle's shiny new Range Rover, Caleb's old Subaru, Uncle Travis' beat-up Ford truck. Everyone was here. I took a deep breath. "We've got this," I whispered to myself, smiling into the rearview mirror at Lily. She beamed back at me, trusting, innocent. God, I wanted to protect that look in her eyes forever. Inside, the house was chaos in the way it always was before a big meal. My mom, Helen, barking orders from the kitchen, pots boiling over, the smell of turkey and brown sugar and cinnamon hanging thick in the air. Dad, George, tinkering with the thermostat like it was an explosive about to go off. Caleb and his boyfriend, Simon, out back arguing over whether the grill was necessary for real Thanksgiving cooking. It was familiar. Comforting, even. For a few minutes, it felt normal. I said my hellos, exchanged hugs that felt a little too quick, a little too practiced. Brielle hugged me too, all stiff-armed and perfumed, and offered me one of those tight, closed-lip smiles that never quite made it to her eyes. "You look cozy," she said, giving me a once-over, her gaze lingering just a second too long at my midsection. I laughed it off. Because what else could I do? We all gathered around the dining room table around 4. It was a tight squeeze, too many chairs, not enough room, elbows bumping, glasses nearly knocked over. Dad gave a brief, awkward toast about gratitude and family, and then the food started getting passed around. For a while, things were fine. I listened more than I talked, helping Lily cut her turkey into smaller pieces, laughing at Logan's story about getting in trouble at school for bringing a tarantula for show and tell. Paige showed off her latest gymnastics medal, and my parents beamed with pride. I mostly stayed quiet, picking at my food, feeling the old familiar ache creep up inside my chest. The feeling of being other. Of not quite fitting. It happened so fast, I barely registered it at first. Brielle was reaching for another helping of mashed potatoes when she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that cut through the room, and said, "Looks like I'm catching up to Marissa this year. Better slow down before I need to borrow her stretchy jeans." It was like someone had opened a window and let all the warmth out of the room. At first, no one said anything. Then there was a smattering of uncomfortable chuckles. My father cleared his throat. My mother busied herself with refilling the gravy boat like she hadn't heard. Even Caleb gave a weak, strained smile, like he wasn't sure what the heck to do. I felt my face flush hot. I forced a laugh because what else could I do? Just another joke at Marissa's expense. Another way to remind everyone of how I was the failure. The one who couldn't keep a marriage together, who couldn't keep the weight off, who couldn't seem to do anything right. It's Thanksgiving, I thought. Don't make a scene. Smile. Swallow it down. I reached for my wine glass, trying to wash down the lump rising in my throat. That's when I felt Lily tug on my sweater sleeve. She looked up at me, her small brow furrowed, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mommy," she said, "why are they being mean?" Every fork froze midair. Every conversation died. I stared at her wide innocent eyes, and it was like something inside me cracked open. Years and years of being the family punchline. Years of pretending it didn't hurt. All of it came rushing to the surface at once. I pushed back my chair, the leg scraping loud against the hardwood floor. I stood there, shaking, not even sure what I was going to say until the words started pouring out. I stood there, trying to steady my breathing, trying to keep the wobble out of my voice. Everyone was staring at me. Even Lily had gone quiet, sensing the shift in the room. I get it, I said, my voice shaking despite everything in me screaming to stay composed. I get that I'm the easy target. That it's funny to pick at the one who doesn't have it all together. Who doesn't look perfect in family photos. Who doesn't live up to whatever picture you all painted in your heads. No one moved. The only sound was the soft clink of Paige dropping her fork onto her plate. But what you don't see, I continued, is everything it took just to show up today. To get dressed. To walk through that door knowing what was waiting for me. You think it's funny to joke about my weight? About how much I'm eating? You think I don't see the looks, the whispers? Brielle shifted in her seat, her smile brittle now, frozen halfway between annoyance and embarrassment. Chase looked down at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. And maybe, I said, my voice growing stronger, maybe I could keep swallowing it. Like I always have. Maybe I could laugh it off like it doesn't cut me to pieces every single time. But when my daughter, my 5-year-old daughter, asks me why her family is being mean to her mother at Thanksgiving dinner, that's when it stops being funny. Lily's little arms wrapped around my leg. I rested my hand on her head, grounding myself. I'm not going to teach her that this is normal. That this is love. That family means smiling through cruelty just because it's easier than standing up for yourself. Still, no one said anything. I looked around the table, at my father, who looked like he wanted to crawl under the table, at my mother, who busied herself with wiping an invisible spot off the gravy boat, at Caleb, who looked absolutely miserable. For the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt free. I think we're done here, I said, lifting Lily into my arms. I turned, my chair still askew, my half-eaten plate abandoned. As I crossed the dining room toward the front door, I heard Caleb's chair scrape back. He jogged after me, catching me just as I was grabbing our coats. Marissa, wait, he said, his voice low. You don't have to leave like this. I shook my head, blinking back the tears that were threatening to spill over. I do, Caleb, I said. I can't sit there and pretend it's okay. I can't let her think it's okay. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else, but then he closed it and just nodded. Give me a second, he said, disappearing back toward the dining room. I wrestled Lily's coat on, her little arms slipping into the sleeves. She was quiet, sensing the weight in the air, her fingers clinging tightly to Mr. Binks. When Caleb returned, Simon was with him, both of them carrying Tupperware containers and a foil-wrapped pie. You shouldn't have to leave without food, Simon said simply, handing me the pie. It was such a small gesture, but it made my chest ache. Thanks, I managed to choke out. Behind them, I saw my mother standing in the hallway, wringing her hands. She looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe, like always, she chose silence over discomfort. I turned away before she could change my mind. I bundled Lily into her booster seat, my hands trembling, my heart hammering in my chest. Caleb and Simon hovered awkwardly by the car, like they weren't sure if they should say goodbye or get in and come with me. Text me when you get home, okay? Caleb said finally. I will, I promised. The drive home was silent, except for Lily humming softly to herself in the back seat. I stared straight ahead, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the radio turned low to some classical music station that felt a million miles away from the chaos we just left behind. Halfway across the bridge into Charleston, Lily broke the silence. Mommy? She said. Yeah, baby? You're not bad, she said simply. You're the best mommy. I nearly had to pull over because the tears came so hard and fast I couldn't see the road for a second. Thank you, sweetheart, I whispered. That means more than you know. She went back to humming, content, and I realized that despite everything, despite the humiliation, the anger, the heartbreak, I had done something right. I had protected her. I had protected myself. And that mattered more than anything else. When we got home, it was already dark. The November air was crisp and smelled faintly of wood smoke and damp leaves. I parked in our usual spot outside our small townhouse, nothing fancy, but it was ours, and carried Lily inside, along with the Tupperware containers Simon and Caleb had given me. The house was quiet except for the clicking of the heater kicking on. I flipped on the living room light, tossing my keys into the bowl by the door. Lily kicked off her shoes and ran to her room, Mr. Binks tucked under one arm, her tiny footsteps echoing down the hall. I stood in the middle of the living room, unsure of what to do next. The adrenaline from the night was wearing off, and in its place, a strange numbness was settling in. I felt heavy, like if I sat down, I might not be able to get back up again. I wandered into the kitchen, setting the food down on the counter. Someone, Caleb, probably, had even packed a serving spoon with the mashed potatoes. It made me smile, a small, broken thing. I leaned against the counter, staring at nothing, until my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Caleb. "You okay?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "Yeah. Just tired." The three little dots appeared, then disappeared. "Then, you were amazing tonight. Just so you know." I didn't have the energy to argue with him, so I just typed back, "Thanks." I set the phone down and wandered back toward Lily's room. She was already in her pajamas, curled up in bed, Mr. Binks tucked under her chin. Her bedside lamp, a soft little unicorn-shaped thing, cast a gentle glow across her face. I sat down on the edge of her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Are you okay, sweetie?" I asked, my voice soft. She nodded, her eyes already half closed. "I'm okay if you're okay." God, the way kids could cut right through to the heart of things without even trying. "I'm okay," I said, meaning it as much as I could. She reached out a sleepy hand and patted mine. "We have pie," she said, as if that made everything right with the world. I laughed quietly. "Yeah, we do." I stayed there for a while, just watching her breathe, feeling the rise and fall of her tiny chest under the blankets. Eventually, when I was sure she was asleep, I slipped out of the room, pulling the door closed behind me until only a sliver of light remained. I went back to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and stood by the window staring out at the street, the glass cool in my hand. Somewhere down the block, someone had already put up Christmas lights, their blue and white bulbs blinking steadily against the darkness. The house felt too quiet. Normally, after a family gathering, I'd be replaying every awkward conversation, every comment, wondering if I had said too much or too little. Tonight, there was no second guessing. No what-ifs. I had stood up for myself. For Lily. And yet the sadness still lingered, heavy and slow, like a storm cloud refusing to move on. A part of me wanted to call my mom, to hear her say it was okay, that she understood, that she was sorry. But deep down, I knew better. My mother had always preferred pretending. Pretending we were a perfect family, pretending problems didn't exist as long as no one said them out loud. I wasn't sure if she even knew how to do anything else. The doorbell rang, startling me so badly I sloshed wine onto the floor. For one wild second, I thought it might be my mother, standing there with a plate of leftovers and an apology. But when I opened the door, it was Caleb. He was holding a grocery bag and looking sheepish. "Thought maybe you could use some backup," he said. I stepped aside to let him in. "You didn't have to come all the way over." He shrugged. "Didn't want you to spend the rest of the night alone, picking at mashed potatoes and crying into a pumpkin pie." I let out a small laugh, some of the tension easing from my shoulders. He set the bag on the counter and started unpacking, a pint of chocolate ice cream, a bottle of cheap red wine, and a six-pack of those little sparkling waters I liked. "You really are the better sibling," I said, half joking, half serious. He just grinned. "I know. We sat on the couch, eating ice cream straight from the carton, passing the wine bottle back and forth like we were teenagers again. For a long time, we didn't talk about what happened. We just sat there, the TV playing some mindless sitcom in the background, the Christmas lights from outside throwing little specks of color across the walls. Finally, Caleb said, "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." I shook my head. "It's not your job to fix it." "Maybe not," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "But I should have had your back a long time ago. We all should have." I didn't know what to say to that. So I said nothing. He set his glass down and turned toward me, serious now. "You know," he said, "just because they're our family doesn't mean you owe them endless chances to hurt you." The words hit harder than I expected. "You stood up tonight," he continued. "For yourself. For Lily. That takes guts. And if they can't handle it? That's on them. Not you." I swallowed hard, blinking back sudden tears. "I'm proud of you, Riss," he said quietly. "Really?" I leaned my head against his shoulder, letting myself rest there for a moment. Just a sister and a brother, two broken kids from a broken family, trying to figure it out together. "You're not alone in this," he said. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed it. The next morning, the house was still quiet when I woke up. Lily was sprawled sideways across her bed, snoring softly, and Caleb was passed out on the couch, one arm dangling off the side, the pint of ice cream slowly melting into a sticky puddle on the coffee table. For a moment, I just stood there, soaking it in, the peace, the safety, the feeling of being surrounded by people who didn't just tolerate me, but truly loved me. My phone buzzed again. I groaned, expecting another awkward "hope you're feeling better" text from someone who didn't really mean it. But it wasn't that. It was from Brielle. "Brielle, are you happy now? You ruined Thanksgiving. Mom and Dad are furious. Logan and Paige were upset all night because of your little scene. Grow up, Marissa." I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. Not one word of apology. Not one ounce of acknowledgement for what she did. Just more blame. More deflection. Typical. I set the phone down without responding. An hour later, after breakfast, if you could call 2 cups of coffee and a handful of dry cereal breakfast, Caleb sat across from me at the kitchen table, scrolling through his own phone. He looked up. "She's already blowing up the family group chat," he said. "Claiming you attacked her in front of the kids." I snorted. "Of course she is. And Mom's backing her," he added, grimacing. "Said you were out of line and should apologize to keep the peace." Something inside me, the old version of me, would have folded right then. Would have cried and apologized and made myself small just to make everyone else comfortable. But not anymore. "I'm not apologizing," I said firmly. Caleb grinned. "Good." I sipped my coffee, staring out the window at the gray, rainy morning. "You know," Caleb said slowly, "there's the Christmas party next month." I looked at him. "What about it?" He shrugged, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Everyone always expects you to stay quiet. To show up, smile, take the crap. What if you didn't?" I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were plotting something illegal. "What if, instead of trying to fit into their little world, you showed them the world you actually built? The life you've made? The people who actually love you?" I stared at him, the idea blossoming slowly in my mind. For years, I'd hidden the parts of myself that didn't fit the family mold. I downplayed my career wins. I hid the friends who became my real support system. I never brought anyone I dated, afraid of the judgment. What if, this time, I didn't hide? What if I showed up, not to cause a scene, not to yell or fight, but just to exist, loudly and unapologetically? That would be the real revenge. Not screaming. Not name-calling. Just being happy. Being whole. Being me. And letting them choke on it. The next few weeks, I threw myself into life. I spent time with Lily. I hung out with Caleb and Simon. I went to dinner with friends who loved me for exactly who I was. I even met someone, a sweet, nerdy guy named Henry who worked at the local museum, and we started quietly seeing each other. I didn't tell anyone in my family. Not yet. I let them stew in their own version of events, their own gossip and side eyes, while I quietly built something stronger. When the Christmas party invite came, a cheery group email from my mother, I RSVP'd yes without hesitation. And I made a plan. The night of the party, I took my time getting ready. I wore a dress that I loved, deep green, hugging my curves in all the right places, and a pair of sparkly earrings Lily had picked out for me at the mall. I curled my hair, did my makeup, and for the first time in years, I looked in the mirror and actually liked the woman staring back. Henry picked me up right on time, looking nervous but excited. "You sure you want to bring me to this thing?" he asked, straightening his tie in the rearview mirror. I laughed. Absolutely. Lily stayed with Caleb and Simon, who promised her a night of Christmas movies and too much popcorn. I kissed her goodbye and told her I loved her more than anything in the world. At the party, the house was decked out in lights and garlands and overpriced decorations from Pottery Barn. The smells of cinnamon and pine filled the air. My parents were at the door, greeting guests with stiff smiles. And then they saw me. I watched the expressions flicker across their faces: surprise, confusion, something almost like fear. Good. I walked in, holding Henry's hand, standing tall. I made polite conversation. I laughed easily. I introduced Henry without apology. I didn't shy away when people stared or whispered. I just smiled and kept moving. Brielle was near the fireplace, wearing a tight red dress and a fake-looking smile. Chase was by the bar, looking like he wished he were anywhere else. When she saw me, Brielle's jaw actually dropped. "Marissa," she said, her voice tight. "You made it." "Of course," I said, smiling sweetly. "Wouldn't miss it." Her eyes flicked to Henry, then back to me, calculating. "And who's this?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake curiosity. "This is Henry," I said. "My boyfriend." The word hung in the air between us. Brielle blinked like she had something caught in her eye. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Well, isn't that nice?" she finally managed. Henry, bless him, just smiled and shook her hand politely. I didn't stay long. I didn't need to. I made my entrance. I lived in my happiness. I showed them, without a single cruel word, that they hadn't broken me. And when we left, arm in arm, with the cold December air biting at our cheeks, I felt lighter than I had in years. Later that night, I got a text from Caleb. "Caleb, you won." I smiled, curled up on the couch with Henry and a sleeping Lily in my lap. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already won, not by tearing them down, not by shouting or fighting, but by choosing myself. By building a life so beautiful, they could only watch from the outside. And honestly, that was the sweetest revenge of all.